Stephen Yeun, welcome to Q.
Thank you very much.
How are you? So I have to imagine, in the U.S. right now, with The Walking Dead, people, you're used to people coming up to you. With this film being the sort of official selection of South Korea for the Oscars, is it the same kind of thing in South Korea right now?
I haven't been since they announced it. Maybe. I think.
Yeah.
I think every country gets to nominate a film for themselves. So maybe it has to be nominated in order for.
But do you get recognized when you're over there?
Oh yeah, sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that you were nervous, or you were recalcitrant, reluctant to work with Chang-dong on this film.
I'm gonna explain that. Less recalcitrant and more worried that I would ruin his film.
Right. There's a difference between no, I don't want to do this, and
yeah. Well, I mean,
why were you worried you would ruin this film?
It's not a. I mean, I kind of say that it was like a passing feeling, but I think it was more like there's no specific mandate that I had for myself to work in Korea.
Right.
It was that I somehow got the fortune to be able to work with two of the greatest directors from that country, Director Lee being one of them. And where I was kind of worried was he wanted me to play a fully Korean national character that, it's embedded into his bones that he's Korean. And what's embedded into my bones is very American. And I figured that the most chance I would get to work in Korea is usually in kind of like a foreigner role. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I was like, I love your work. I don't want to ruin it for you.
So what was the moment you said yes?
I read it, and then I was like, okay, I can do it.
What was the change?
If it made sense to me.
Like it did.
Yeah, it made sense to me. I would say that it kind of spoke beyond words on the page. It was more an emotion that kind of showed itself, and it made sense to me that I could be a part of this and kind of help create his vision.
Well, what do you think his vision was for you? Why do you think he wanted you in this film?
Well, I think Ben. Have you seen the film?
Yes.
Okay, so I think Ben.
I should say, so to be clear for everybody, Ben is sort of a rich, wealthy, rich and wealthy, by the way, a guy who disrupts these people's lives in some way, right? Yeah.
And I will say, I think maybe it's more noticeable to a Korean audience, but what's kind of embedded into, and the genius of Director Lee's casting, in my opinion, is he wanted some of my Americanness in it. In so much as that the character's not a Korean American, but he's a traveled man, and he's a worldly man, and he's almost someone you can't figure out in traditional Korean archetypes. So you can't say that person's like this type of person, or that person's like this type of person. Really, you kind of have no idea who this person is and where he's from or what he's about. He's eternally mysterious that way. And so he juxtaposed the work that I had to put in to perfect my Korean and perfect kind of the way that I move through Korea as a human being. And he juxtaposed that to the Americanness of me that I can't fully shed for myself. That I think was really pretty cool. It confused people in the right way.
What work did you have to do to tap into that side of you? Because I want to be, for people who don't know your full background. So you were born in Korea. Mm-hmm. You spent some time in Canada. I think like a year in Canada.
Regina, Saskatchewan.
I think I have to shout that out. I think it's a government mandated.
You have to shout out Regina
at any given moment.
Cool, please do.
Regina. Shout out Regina.
Regina.
Heart of the prairies.
It's the heart of the prairies.
And then I don't know. And then you grew up in Michigan, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so but in this film, like I said, you were not playing a Korean American, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. You're playing someone who was born and raised in Korea. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you had to tap into something. So what did you have to tap into? What work did you do?
Well, you work on the language. Luckily, I was able to be there a month and a half before we started filming, and I just lived there. And I've never lived there before as an adult.
Where'd you live?
I stayed at in Itaewon.
Right.
So Itaewon, or you go to like Gangnam, or you go anywhere in Korea. Normally when you're an expat, you typically tend to come back to Korea and either stay with your family, or you hang out with other expats.
Right.
In this instance, it was really nice to just hole up on my own and just be out there in the world in the country of Korea, with no guide or parameters, really just out there immersing myself. And so that was part of it. And then just, yeah, it wasn't unfamiliar to me, but it was unfamiliar enough that it was a new experience for me.
What were you taking in when you were living there? Like, what were you paying attention to? What was being absorbed?
Well, I guess the first thing you notice is that it's all the same.
Right.
The same people are in the same places in just different countries.
Right.
They're just called different things, or your brain has to work through the mental gymnastics of being like, that's not how I categorize that person. And then you realize that you put someone in a box, and then you try to take them out of the box. And so it's a lot of deconstruction in that way. And then, Korea for an expat can be very lonely. And so that was a portion of things that actually, once I noticed myself becoming lonely, it was cool, and I just kind of like stayed in there. And when you're in a hotel on the top of one of the higher peaks of the city of Seoul, and you're just there living kind of an analogous Gatsby-esque situation, it helps with the film.
I understood you read Nietzsche to prepare for this film?
Sure, yeah.
What did you get from that?
What can you get from Nietzsche? A lot of stuff.
But specifically for this, because one of the things I loved about the film, and I found fascinating about the film, was it's a very emotional film, but the emotions are restrained in the performance of them. Do you know what I mean? And I wondered how that contrasted to the direction of emotions that perhaps you got when you work in the U.S.
You're totally spot on. That's also being very Korean in that way. Collectivism does an interesting thing of making you put your best face forward, which then makes you have to suppress your true emotions. And it's just a different style of living, and I think it allows people, in some sense, to be very, very deep with very, very little. And so you can convey an entire emotion through a teeth-sucking noise, or like just a glare, or just a hand movement. And so those little tiny nuances become that much more magnified and intense. And I think that's a very Korean, in my experience, it's a very Korean thing. I would say, to connect like the Nietzsche and all that stuff together. When you live above a system that everyone is cognizant of, you can gain absolute power mentally in your own self, and also either get the respect of others or get the ire of others. Yeah. And I think Ben as a character definitely lives above the structures of that society and the rules, at least in his own mind. And it's fortified and kind of allowed because he's incredibly rich. So,
What a challenge. Sorry, I'm not an actor, I don't know anything about acting. But what a challenge that must be to, these are complex things, to then have to express them, like you said, with very little emotion on one's face. It must be challenging for you as an actor.
It was a lot of mental prep. The challenge didn't come from a physical standpoint. The challenge didn't come in a way where I had to work out or I had to do other things like that. Rather, the challenge was made aware to me after we filmed the film. And you kind of just take in how much of you has altered during the time that you were in this character, and how much you need to probably shed to get back to where you started from. And it was a hard time for, you know, family, for me being away. And when you're kind of locked into a Nietzsche way of looking at life, you know.
That can stay with you?
Oh yeah, that can stay with you. But you know, that's the practice and work, hopefully, of being a professional actor, is to make sure that you have something grounded and rooted to bring you back to that reality. But I will say, like, also the joy of being an actor is to be part of something that is so immersive that you don't even know it's immersive until you're done.
That's so funny. I've often said to my friends that I think one of the qualities I don't always love about myself is sometimes when I go to see films, I'll leave thinking like the lead character, a little bit like the lead character, and obviously, I always think that says something wrong about me. You know, that like if the lead character is very confident, I will leave with a different kind of confidence. You know, if the lead character is a little bit cutthroat for like 10 minutes afterwards, I'll be like, well, you know, I know.
That means you got great experience at the cinema.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
Hey? But then, if that's how I feel watching it, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I can only imagine then to live with this character for months. It must stay with you for a while.
Don't ask my wife about.
Oh, is that so?
No, I mean she's great. She's fine, but for her it was hard, because to know somebody like the way that she knows me, and then to be around when I'm playing somebody else, that's not easy. So yeah, that one was an intense one. I wouldn't say every single role takes that type of immersion, but this one, it kind of just sneaks up on you, because you're in another country, playing another person that lives in a completely different way of life than you, and every parameter that is around you is feeding back into that loop that is who you are. And so yeah, it was pretty weird.
I know you've also said, not to harp on it, but you've also said you felt more fully yourself while doing this role.
Yeah, and what I mean by fully myself, actually I don't mean fully myself.
Okay.
I mean, I felt free, meaning I didn't have any limitations to, you know, when you're in a traditional, when I'm sometimes in a traditional American project, it might not even be written on the page, but because it's encoded into the discussion of every day, you kind of go through and work through all that stuff in your own mind be like, what does it mean for an Asian person to be this character? When in Korea, they don't think about that. They go, you're that character now. And so, you know.
Yes, what a difference that must have been.
Incredible difference.
Tell me more about that.
You feel what you can't explain here. Because
say, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
You say, I can't really explain it.
Yeah.
Tell me more about it.
Well, you know what it is? You know what it is? It's the gaze and the lens of the Western world is not upon you anymore. And so you don't have to explain yourself. You can just be. And I think that's the key distinction.
How much of this role will you be taking with you in the future?
I hope not a lot, but I hope the good things that last from this film and this experience are knowing my new parameters, knowing what it feels like to spread my wings and limbs and everything as far as they can go, knowing that I don't have to explain myself, what that feels like. It's a pretty good feeling.
I wanted to get your perspective on this. I think, as we all know, so much of what we see in pop culture analysis right now is largely a conversation around representation. You know, that particularly came to a head with Black Panther, with Crazy Rich Asians. But I don't know if we're spending a lot of time talking about what representation actually means. So if you'll indulge me, what does that word mean to you?
Well, I think very simply, representation means being able to see something closer to your experience. I think where we talk about it on a functional societal level is that most people, including myself, love boxes and we love putting things in boxes so that we can feel safe in our world.
Right.
You go, that person's that, and that person's that.
Well, you even said when you were in Korea, you even felt that way, right? Yeah.
And when you do that, you usually digest the world based on whatever you experience or see. So if you're watching a very reductive character played by a person of color, or you see a role that mitigates or kind of marginalizes someone in a way, and you don't have direct access to anyone else that can tell you that it's different, that's a box that you're going to put every single person you see that way in. Or at least your brain is going to, and you have to work hard to go against that. So that's, first off, functionally what representation does. So it is very important in that way. And I think then on top of that, I think where representation is very important is that when you feel the power of your subgroup or the previously marginalized group that you're a part of, and you feel the power of that group, it gives you power, and it gives you the ability to overcome whatever burden that part of you has to bear, and it's now evenly distributed because it's just we're all in it together. The metering of that, though, is very important, because it's very easy to then listen to that and say, that is all of me, and that is only all of me, and focus on something that is just specifically a part of you, instead of letting that give you power and allow you to be yourself completely and wholly.
Right.
So, yeah, representation is super important.
But super complex. I mean, that's the thing.
Very
right?
complex.
You know?
I would say that's where I think we're going to have to deal with that. I think we're going to have to deal now. We've set the stage, and now we're going to have to deal with the complexities of what it brings.
I could tell this role was really transformative for you.
Oh, it's so fun.
leave me with an image. Paint me a picture of a moment on set where perhaps you knew, like, wow, this is something else.
When you are with a director like Director Lee, who I would say, and this is going to sound like it's very effusive praise, but like when you're with someone that we're lucky to have film be his medium, because he could really just tell you in many different ways. He's a novelist as well, and he started making movies when he was 40. When you can be around someone like that and have the calm and the patience that he has kind of cascade onto you as well, you grow so much. When you see someone who's 65 being able to lay down his own ego to readdress himself and society and put a mirror up to it and say, this is the truth that I believe in now, or that there is no truth, that really we're evolving as we go, and he's willing to lay down his ego constantly to get to that, that's incredible. And so a lasting image is, he'll do something like, we'll shoot a scene, he'll watch it on the monitor again, and we'll, let's do it again tomorrow. And you don't question it. You come back the next day, you do it tomorrow, and all of a sudden in that same scene, a flock of geese flies through the back of the frame.
Oh, wow.
And then you're like, okay, you were just waiting for that. And he wasn't waiting for the flock of geese, he was just waiting for it. And he gets it every time. And that's like, I think he ruined filmmaking for me.
Forever?
Yeah,
Right.
but I will say that's something I'll keep with me for the rest of my life.
It's been nice to talk to you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you.
Appreciate it.